President Nixon today called on the nation to observe Monday as a national day of participation with the moon landing, in effect a holiday. Mr. Nixon ordered federal government offices closed, and he urged other governmental units and as many private employers as possible to give as many employees as possible the day off. Probably a very good idea. People are likely to be quite sleepy during the day on Monday. The president said, as the astronauts go where man has never gone, as they attempt what man has never tried, we on Earth will want, as one people, to be with them in spirit, to share the glory and the wonder, and to support them with prayers that all will go well. Well, if you were with the Apollo 11 astronauts right now, you'd be nearly 1/3 of the way to the moon. Your command module would be docked nose to nose with the Lunar module, and you'd no doubt be delighted with how smoothly everything has gone so far. A report on this amazing day from ABC science editor Jules Bergman.
Apollo 11 is headed for the moon tonight on a nearly perfect trajectory that'll see Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Mike Collins going into orbit around the moon midday Saturday. All three astronauts are in perfect shape, and their Apollo 11 spacecraft functioning so well that the first part of this historic adventure, reaching the moon, now looks like a certainty. Through the long night and the countdown, there never seemed to be any doubt about the outcome. And even at 4 a.m. this morning, it looked as if half of America had surrounded the Cape to witness the launching. An estimated 700,000 persons were gathered along roads, beaches, and parks nearby. The huge Saturn V's visible for many miles to the thousands who were up early, straining to see the first launch of men attempting a landing on the moon. By dawn, the beaches were clogged with cars, trailers, bicycles, and a surging mass of humanity determined to watch it all despite the clinging damp heat. Former President Lyndon Johnson, who had flown in on an Air Force jet yesterday as President Nixon's guest, watched from the VIP stands at the Kennedy Space Center. If all this has happened in the last 12 years, Johnson declared, I wonder why we can't put the same effort into peace for all time. Reverend Ralph Abernathy, who had led a protest march here yesterday, watched the launch today and declared, I really forgot the fact that we have so many hungry people. I was one of the proudest Americans as I stood on this spot. Then, precisely at 9:32 a.m. Eastern Time, the Saturn V thundered into life.
10, 9, ignition sequence start.
There was never any doubt about it. The Saturn V on its fourth manned mission performed flawlessly, inserting Apollo 11 into a perfect Earth orbit out over the Atlantic and setting the stage for its lunar voyage. 2 hours 44 minutes after liftoff, the third stage rocket ignited again, speeding Apollo 11 up to escape velocity, 25,000 miles an hour, overcoming the Earth's gravity and heading it out toward the moon. 20 minutes later, Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins in Apollo 11 separated from their burned-out booster, then turned the spacecraft around and came back in to dock with Eagle, their lunar module. The docking went exactly as planned, and after checking out connections with the LEM, the astronauts extracted Eagle from the burned-out booster. The booster, using the vented remnants of its own fuel, was then sent into a different flight path, and Apollo 11 was on its way. The spacecraft is aimed so well that an initial mid-course correction tonight has been skipped. One mid-course steering correction is scheduled for tomorrow, and the first live television pictures en route to the moon tomorrow night at 7:32 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, which ABC News will bring to you live. Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins headed for man's first landing on the moon, their mission off to a perfect start. This is Jules Bergman, ABC News at Cape Kennedy.
We'll have a progress report on Apollo 11 tonight, later on ABC. And incidentally, if you have any questions about Apollo 11, ABC space experts will be very glad to provide the answers. They will do it during ABC's 30-hour special broadcast beginning Sunday noon, Eastern Daylight Time. Simply drop us a card with your question, send it to ABC News, Apollo 11, Box 1100, New York. Howard and I will be back with more news in a moment.
in Washington, question A1 about Apollo 11, will it succeed, has already been shoved aside by question A2. What will we do after it succeeds? Vice President Agnew answered that question at Cape Kennedy today. Here is what the Vice President said.
Well, as you know, we're cleared already for Apollo 12 through 21 in the existing Apollo program, which will continue with the exploration of the moon. I think we shouldn't be too timid to say, for example, that by the end of this century we're going to put a man on Mars. That's my judgment. The way science has developed in the past 50 years, we'll have the capability, and I wouldn't hesitate to say we're going to be on Mars, regardless of whether we say we are or not by the end of this century.
Mr. Agnew, pressed by reporters regarding that statement about going to Mars, said later that he knew he was a minority of one on the four-man committee which will recommend next steps in space to the president, but he said somebody's going to Mars, it might as well be us. Here in Washington, Democratic Senate leaders Mansfield and Edward Kennedy opposed the idea, but House Democratic Whip Hale Boggs called a news conference to state his views.
Senator Mansfield
today, when he was asked about the Agnew proposal and the thought that we should now think about putting a man on Mars, said that there are a lot of problems here on Earth that Americans should face up to before any further space adventures, as he called them. I take it you're in some disagreement with that.
Yes, I'm in rather complete disagreement with that. President Kennedy set an objective. He said, we will go to the moon. Now, God willing, we are on the way to the moon. And the discussion is, having gone there, or hopefully having gone there, now do we stop? And my answer to you is, if we do, we make the greatest mistake of any society in history.
Senator Dirksen warned his colleagues today that they are playing with dynamite by delaying action on the income tax surcharge.
I've discovered an unexpected fringe benefit of helping out on our coverage of Apollo 11. From very early this morning until well past mid-afternoon, I had no opportunity, nor I must say any inclination, to read or think about anything else, except maybe the Mets and the Cubs. However, Howard was not so fortunate, and he has a comment. Howard?
One peril to human life in the moon flight is the extreme gaseous content of the prose it inspires. Everybody feels something important ought to be said, yet mostly bromides emerge, so we tend to bloat them with wind to make them big enough for the occasion. Most of those comments I can take, indeed I make a few myself, but one today lit my burner. The New York Times reported what Europeans think of the moon flight. They admire our technology, but their verdict was our humanity and our civilization remain flawed. Having spent my first 20 years in this civilization and my second 20 in the one in Europe, I feel qualified to call that the most hypocritical, patronizing, offensive, and false bromide of them all. The most horrible events of this century have been two world holocausts, both created by European civilization. The U.S. ended both and prevented a third, almost single-handedly made Europe not a cockpit of war for the first time in a long time. The most terrible tyrannies of all time are fascism and communism, both creations of European civilization, and they still prosper. Neither has gotten a foothold here. Our flawed civilization seems uniquely hospitable only to the politics of free choice. Americans who have orgies of enthusiasm for life in Europe generally do it on American incomes. Those who try it on Europe's normal rewards for endeavor lose their enthusiasm and come home, like the Negro GI who deserted to Sweden, then came back saying, only in America did a black man have scope. So our technology is terrific, but our civilization and humanity are not bad either. Like the car rental company, Americans try harder. Unlike the car rental company, they generally come first. Frank?
Thank you, Howard. That's tonight's news and comment. I'm Frank Reynolds. Good night.